Good evening, everybody. I wanted to share with you tonight a dream of two young Saudi gentlemen. When I say young, I mean my age, late 30s, early 40s. And their dream was to build a high-rise tower in their home city of Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. And I think why it's become an inspiration to me is that since I met them 4 years ago, I didn't realize what they had really undertaken to do. Bearing in mind that neither of them had any property training whatsoever. Their son was an IT entrepreneur. Ibrahim was a nuclear physicist. So what they got themselves into was incredibly brave for a start. But what really drove them was they wanted something special in their city. They wanted to do something that made them really proud of their city, put their city on the map, put Saudi Arabia on the map. And it's just quite remarkable when people undertake something that is completely beyond their scope of expertise. But before we go there, I just want to place their achievement, or soon to be achieved, soon to be realized, in a global context, because a few weeks ago we passed the unbelievable number of 7 billion people on Earth, and what this translates to is, if we assume that Bucharest is about 4 million people, we need 1,750 other cities to cope with 7 billion people. So it's a huge, huge number. And a few years ago, in 2007, the world's urban population for the first time exceeded the rural population. So if you add a little bit of exponential growth on that, we're probably looking at about 4 billion people living in cities today. And just to give us an idea of where they all are, is there are 22 cities in the world that are larger than 10 million people, really, really big cities. And 11 of them are in emerging markets. So I think that's where the real challenge is. We're all familiar with sustainability issues. We need to save the world. We need to conserve energy. We need to live better, more efficiently. But the reality is these massive cities that are expanding in emerging markets and third world areas, they don't have the capital to engage sustainability fully. And we're really heading for a huge crisis because the infrastructure of those cities are absolutely incapable of coping. Not one of these big cities are planned. Experts all agree that a city that is the most manageable, with a few exceptions, is probably a city of around 3 to 4 million people, where human life can be of decent quality. We don't engage with a big city in our daily lives. We engage with a building one step at a time, one door at a time, one room at a time. So, if we just look ahead, the problem only gets worse. This is 2015, and the projected growth of cities in India, you can see well over 20 million for one city. Lagos in Africa is just one. You've got Sao Paulo. But these cities are just growing out of control. And the challenge will be to try and make them manageable, create smaller, newer cities, break those cities up and manage them better. But there's a map that represents a property reflection in wealth of value per continent. And what it shows is a bulging North America. So North America's property value is way more than Africa, and way more than South America, way more than China even. And unless we get our heads around that and create decent property investment opportunities in the third world, we're never really going to be able to improve the lives of those people. So, getting back to Ibrahim and Issam and what they wanted to do in Saudi Arabia, I need to paint a picture for you of what Saudi Arabia is like. Just with a show of hands, has anybody here been to Saudi Arabia? I don't expect to see many. There was one next door, but it's off everybody's radar, and the reason for that is not because we don't know where it is. We all do, but mainly because of its religious conservatism. We know that they're the keeper of the holy mosques. But the thing that really underpins it, and there was another map that I needed to show you, was in a similar way that North America was bulging with their property growth and property value. In the same way, Saudi Arabia is absolutely pregnant with oil, way more than any other country on earth, and it gives everyone a sense of comfort. It's the only reason why the Arab Spring hasn't spread there, and it's got a big population. It's got 21 million people. There's probably about 5 million migrant laborers there. You can see some Pakistanis here playing their beloved cricket, and they don't mind that it's 50 degrees in the sun. They'll just put down their mat and roll it out in the desert and have a game of cricket. They're earning money that they wouldn't earn back home. They're happy. So it's a very strange society, and one that's obviously attracts a lot of social commentary. But the reality is that the Sawas who have won their land 150 years ago in bloody battles have never really seen Saudi Arabia as belonging to their people. It's their land. If people want to live there, that's okay. But it's only in the last really 10, 20 years that they've started to share their wealth and invest back, because they realize if they don't do that, they will have an Arab Spring. But what makes it a really even more bizarre country is women can't vote, women can't drive, they're not really allowed to have professions yet. So it's a very insular place. It's very closeted, very inward-looking, very protective, very mistrustful. And so I was there 6 weeks ago. That was the headline in the newspaper. So finally, women get the vote. They haven't quite got it because the parliament still needs to enact it. But it's no place to live for most people. If you're female and you want to do sport, you need to cover up. And sorry, that was from something that shouldn't have been in that presentation. But really what happens, because they're so inward-looking, is there's a lot of discussion that takes place. They've all got something to say, but you're not really allowed to debate anything, as with all dictatorial societies. So our project meetings would be something like on the right, and an oil conference would obviously be 200-300 people seated, and there's a lot of talk going on. There's a lot of public discussion, but everyone goes off privately and sort of says what they really want to say. So it's a very difficult place where the only interaction and the only entertainment or recreation of any comfort that they have is shopping. What's a woman meant to do? It's 50 degrees during the day. You can't really do much. You're going to go out at night. The culture is very late. Men often work till 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. So they've got drivers. They go to the mall. All the brands are there. It's the only place they can engage internationally. And they've obviously got spending power because the oil wealth is underpinning everything. So that's where it happens for them. And 70% of the Saudi population of 21 million are below the age of 30. So there's about 14 million youngsters that have got very little to do. And, you know, there's no mortgage law, for example, in Saudi Arabia. So if you start a new family, you're living with your parents, you can't really do much. And as a result, a lot of them are very, very lazy. The only way they can interact with other kids, or you know, if you're a 16-year-old and you want to meet other people from other sexes, the only way you do it is through social networking. You'll go to the mall, you'll put on your Bluetooth, you'll see who you can pick up, and you'll ask, are you the girl standing next to the ice cream place 20 meters away? And she'll say yes, and then you'll go and have a chat. So that's how they meet people. So it's very, very difficult to imagine living in this society. But I've been working there for about 10 years. And designing a shopping mall like this is quite easy because it's like the shopping mall here. You know, it's wonderful, it's internalized. You know, you're doing the same things that you are in a place like Bucharest. You're taking the old commercial shops off the high street, and you're getting international brands in here. But you know, that's another debate. But to do a tower, which is so visibly impactful on a city, was something that we were quite nervous about getting involved in Saudi Arabia. And the simple reason is that, you know, they, in many ways, aesthetically, are still living 20 years ago. Their cities are very, very flat, not much in the line of inspiration to talk of, very few delights, very little landscaping going on. So when you're trying to sell somebody a tower of the future, which is what Essam and Ibrahim really wanted to do with their community, they wanted to do a tower that was the future, that could embody where Saudi Arabia was going to go. But it's a little bit like, look at this next pic, it's a little bit like, you know, we're all wearing football boots that are on the right, but Saudi Arabia are wearing the one on the left. So we all know, you know, when those of you who are keen on football, when Ronaldo started wearing red boots and silver boots, we all laughed at him, you know, for being a bit of a poser. But now everybody's doing it. So, you know, it's a comfort thing that you do gradually with aesthetics. But for Saudi Arabia, effectively, you know, and it's the same with cars. 20 years ago, you know, we were all driving the car on the left, or similar box shapes. If somebody had offered us the car on the right, we wouldn't have felt immediately comfortable with it because it was just too much of a mental shift. And that was the problem we were facing with the tower. But it didn't seem to affect Ibrahim and Essam at all. They wanted to take this new concept to their community, and they absolutely had massive community input, which we didn't see a lot of. You know, they would go talk to the mayor, they would go talk to fishermen, the man in the street, and the site was, and you can get a feel from the air, what this is the shoreline of Jeddah. We're looking above the Red Sea, and the pier sticking out there just to the left of it is the site. But it's a very, you know, it should be a fantastic waterfront. And this is the city behind. You know, very dreary. Most of the buildings have been built 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and you know, now, and I'm talking, you know, when we started, this was end of 2007, beginning of 2008, where the world didn't know about the financial crisis yet, and everyone was very excited, and we kept moving forward. But another thing we were very worried about was, and you're thinking, well, what on earth is this? And it's very literal. It's a shed built over a villa. And what happens in Saudi Arabia is, because they've never had a mortgage law, they don't have much of a property register. Only in recent last 3 to 5 years have they started doing that. But there was a rich merchant who bought this land, built himself a villa. The planning authorities told him everything around it was zoned for 2 stories. He happened to end up having 7 daughters, and they would swim in the pool, and life was merry until somebody got bribed and a hotel went up next door. And being the religious man that he was, he couldn't allow anyone to look down on his daughters having a swim, so he built a roof over his house. So, and these sort of things are quite typical, maybe not always to this extreme, but you see this a lot. So building a tower of 50, 60, 70 stories was something that was just not going to fit in with this mental framework that was in existence. But nevertheless, we believed in the passion and the absolute enthusiasm of Ibrahim and Essam, and we moved forward. The site, as I was showing you, was about 200 meters long, about 25 meters wide, so very, very thin, and in an area that happened to have the Hilton Hotel, but that's about all that was there of consequence. A lot of the buildings next door were not even inhabited and literally crumbling and falling apart, so it's hardly the environment that you expect to have a futuristic tower built on, especially when there's no running water connection there, there's no sewage connection there. So, literally building out in the desert. So that's just showing the close-up environment of where the tower's meant to go. It's between that building on the lower left corner picture is the Sheraton Hotel, and our site is in the middle between the rambling blocks on the left. And this is where all the debate happened. Ibrahim and Essam were absolutely obsessed with turning everything over 10 times. And they brought the community in, and we would debate everything, and it's very difficult to do that on such a large scale when you're dealing with something of this level. But we looked at feasibilities, we looked at heights, we looked at shapes, and as we moved along, certain things started to come out. We realized that we in Saudi Arabia, they're very uncomfortable with basements. And that suited us because there's a lot of Red Sea coral below the ground. So you ended up with a podium, and then there was going to be the tower above, which ended up becoming the sail of the ship that was starting to resonate with the locals. But we explored more, and we looked at simpler forms, easier to build, cheaper, but they were having none of it. They really wanted something that was special, that everyone could identify with, that if you went there, you knew, I'm in Jeddah, I'm nowhere else. And that was finally the shape that we settled on. The tower on the left ended up being offices. That just happened to be the most feasible thing at the time in mid-2008. Could easily have been a residential block. But that was the sail in the wind, facing the prevailing winds from the Red Sea. The tail of the boat, if you like, on the right, the little tower was to be a hotel. And we obviously started modeling and looking at all the technical aspects with the engineers. But when it really came down to it, we had to sell the concept to the community. So, we'd all checked everything out, and everything made sense, and the numbers were adding up, and technical aspects were adding up. But we needed to go to the community, and it was a really, really nervous time for everybody. And we started to present things in just very, very simple terms. We did these sorts of wireframe diagrams to work with the engineers, to explore facades, to explore structural mechanics. We wanted the tower to appear as though it was floating. Ibrahim and Essam and the community wanted something that looked like it was alive and had energy, wanted to move. It shouldn't be stagnant. Needed to show and embody what Saudi Arabia was about. And then just through very simple thumbnail sketches, we had to sell what this building was to them. So it was an unusual form, with a bit of energy, not too far away here. And one of the things that they were adamant about was they wanted public access. Now, if you go to Saudi Arabia, you realize this just doesn't exist anywhere. When you stay in a hotel, you, even if you're in a taxi, you can't get to the front door. You're dropped off at a barricade. You go through X-ray machines, the same at a shopping mall. But they didn't want that. They wanted the building to be open, transparent, public, wanted people to participate. And you know, it made it very, very difficult. So what ended up happening was the land that had been used to put the building on, they wanted to replace that on the top of the podium of the parking. So the orange represents the public areas. They wanted people to be able to come in from outside, even though you'd invested in a little office. You know, anybody could come and visit you, and anybody could go up onto the deck, come into the lobbies, go up to the Sky Lounge, go up to the restaurant at the top. And they wanted sky gardens, they wanted green lungs, and all of this was you know, to the detriment of the financial feasibility of the project, obviously. And there needed to be a helipad at the top because of fire escape issues, and this doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. But we had to use it as a sculptural form. And eventually we came to the final marketing images that they needed to go to market to. So we got to the end of 2008 and they were about ready to do this, and financial crash happened. And they came to me and they said, yeah, Edmund, don't worry. Project's not stopping. We're going to persevere. We're going to sell the space. But we're not sure that we can pay any fees for a while. So we said, well, we've come this far with you, we're not going to stop now, don't worry about it. And that was the effect that these two men had. They had the ability and the enthusiasm and the passion to galvanize everybody. And they pushed through. Out of all the projects, hundreds of projects that stopped across the world during that time, they didn't, and they managed to push through. And they got financing, or they got investors, and we slowly built. And this is just the final rendering that shows how it engages with the sea, and that ultimately they did achieve their ambition of having a tower that was alive and looked like it was going to move. And the interiors were something that we turned over again and again and again. You know, there was no open checkbook by any means. There were two very, very grounded, very rational men that looked at everything 10 times before making the final decision, but wanted something done properly. They wanted it done, you know, they wanted sweeping vistas inside, they wanted good quality natural stone, they didn't want anything fake, they wanted the piazza on the roof, lots of water, very important to Arabian culture, and just views of the offices and the sky lobby. And then this was a funicular lift that goes up the back of the building, for no other reason other than to allow the public to come in, not use the security core, but to go up the back of the building, look back at the city, engage with their city, see their city in a different way they've never seen it before. And it takes you right up to the 52nd level. There's a stop at the Sky Lounge where you can have a cup of coffee. You can carry on to the 52nd floor and have lunch or dinner, whatever the case may be. So, you know, these sorts of things, yeah, they didn't need to do at all, but the community was driving it and they had the backing of everybody. So eventually we got underway, and these are just some views of the construction. I think that's on about the 30th floor. We're probably on the 40th floor now, and about 6, 7 floors to go to reach 52. And you can see it's starting to take shape with the angle on this one on the left is obviously starting to announce itself in the city fabric and looking very different. The structural form there starting to be quite visible. And we started to get a lot of feedback from locals. There was a fisherman that said the tower was sailing the wrong way. We were bringing bad energy to the city. It should be the other way. But the point was that they were talking in a way they'd never done before. And even now, 6 or 7 floors from the top, now suddenly they want somebody had an idea of having the helipad as a lookout point, like the Sears Tower. And people could go out and stand on glass floors and look out over 50 floors beneath them. And the public could come and pay to do this. Now, this is unthinkable in Saudi Arabia. The only other two buildings that are higher than 20 floors are institutional buildings in Riyadh, and this is certainly the only one in Jeddah. And I think for me, and this is just the final look of the future that Ibrahim and Essam had. What was important for me was to communicate that, for them it was never about whether the tower was the tallest. There's going to be taller towers one day. It didn't need to be the most beautiful. It didn't need to brag. It didn't need to do any of those things. They just wanted to do something that communicated with the community and was very, very special and dear to them. And my sense is that if they can do this without any previous property training, if they can achieve this in their city and have something that resonates with their community and makes people proud of their city, if we can multiply just 2 or 3 Essam and Ibrahims throughout the world, I think we'll have a much better place. Thank you.